have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello. Thank you so much for listening to the Bold Moves podcast. I am excited to share another episode with you. I am the host, Mandy Bryce. This is episode number 209, and I think you are going to enjoy getting to know Mira Joleigh. She is in a mastermind group that she invited me to join, and we meet every Monday virtually, and we're all helping each other with growing our own businesses and with accountability. And so it was super exciting for me to take some time and chat with her and learn more about her story and the incredible risks that she's taken and ways that she repeatedly pushes herself outside of her comfort zone to grow and learn about herself and then now help other people as a life coach. Her journey is windy and interesting and fantastic, and I think you're going to love it. Also, she has a wonderful giveaway for you that's a free download that you'll want to check out, and she will offer 50% off a breakthrough discovery conversation. So if you're listening to her and you think that she would be wonderful to work with, you can reach out to her and mention the Bold Moves podcast discount that she will happily honor. So stay tuned for my conversation with the lovely Mira Joleigh. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. Today I am chatting with Mira Joleigh, who I'm actually in a mastermind group with. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. So, of course, you know that the show is called Bold Moves, and you wouldn't be on here if you hadn't made some. So I'd love it if you would share a little bit about you, your story, and some of the risks that you've taken that have gotten you to where you are.
Open-ended questions. Let's run with it. So I grew up as a military kid, so I had a very authoritarian kind of upbringing. Mm-hmm. You would think the haircut had something to do with that. It's a completely different story.
I love the haircut.
Thank you. One of my bold moves. Yeah. So I moved around a lot growing up, and I finally settled in Southern California as my happy place, but there's a lot that leads up to that. It's such an open-ended question. I'm just struggling to figure out exactly where to start. So I'll go professional first. Okay. In my day-to-day life today and now, I am a life coach and a business mentor. So I'm supporting ambitious women in their 20s and 30s to find their passion, rock their confidence, and in most cases, transition careers or launch their first business. And I nickname my audience Ambitionista. And the journey to get there is the fun part. And when someone asks me, like, so how did you become a life coach? Like, what got you into that? Yeah. That's such a Pandora's box, and there's so many stories to tell. So I'm going to give you a little summary, and then I'll let you kind of dig into wherever you want to take it from there.
Sounds perfect.
I moved from the deep south, southeast Georgia, to the Portland, Oregon area. That was one major bold move for me.
Diagonal across the country. Yeah.
Yeah, all the way across the country. Sold everything that I owned, pretty much everything except my cats and my computer, and jumped into a new part of the country. What's cool is that I was a military kid, so that wasn't so unusual for me. Okay. I was kind of used to that moving across the country thing. Yeah. But what's notable is that I was leaving a very conservative part of the country, which is, I guess you could say, affectionately known as the Bible Belt. Yeah. And that's where I had come out of the closet as a lesbian. So it was a hard place to be different, mm-hmm. a hard place to be something that might be considered against some people's religious perspectives, and into a city that is so liberal, so hippie-tastic. Portland's whole motto is keep Portland weird. Yeah. So it was one of the most exciting and interesting culture shocks of my life. And then another major transition for me was moving from Portland, Oregon to Los Angeles, California, once again selling almost everything, cashing in my entire net worth, and leaving a pretty intense depression and just a lot of toxic stuff behind to start my life over. So those are two big, bold leaps, and I'll let you take it away from there.
Yeah, so I guess my first question would be, what inspired each of those big cross-country or, I guess, down the coast moves?
The first one, I'm going to say actually in both cases, there was an intuitive drive. There was something kind of quietly whispering in my intuition, like, hey, it's time for you to go. It's time for you to move. There's something more for you out there.
Mm-hmm.
And leaning into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I didn't want to stay in a small town in Georgia. I knew
Yeah.
that there was a whole big world out there that I wanted to explore, and that where I was circumstantial. It wasn't really a place of my choosing. Okay. So the fun story behind that is that I went to a website. I don't even know if this site still exists because it was like 16 years ago. Findyourspot.com.
Okay.
And it puts you through a series of questions, and it tells you where you're supposed to live based on your personality and like what you're into. Yeah. So a ton of West Coast cities came up on my list, not surprisingly. I don't know. I just got curious about Oregon, and I did some research, and I was with someone. I was in a relationship at the time, and I talked her into coming with me, and off we went into the unknown. I'll never forget. My grandfather I guess he was kind of a conservative guy, and this is before he passed away. We dropped in to visit them on our road trip all the way across the country, and he said, watch out, there's lots of liberals and atheists out there. And in my mind, I was like, that's a good thing.
I look forward
warning me.
I love it. So I'm curious, because you mentioned that you came out when you were living in a very conservative area. Can you tell me more about how that was, and, you know, like, I guess how people you knew reacted, and just like give a little more behind that experience? My awareness of my sexual orientation started to bubble up around 12, 13, 14, when most of your peers start to become boy crazy, and I wasn't boy crazy at all. Yeah.
And then over the next couple of years in through high school, it started to become really clear to me that I was different. And I had my first girlfriend at 17, and I started to tell my friends, and thankfully that went pretty well, but it was terrifying. I was afraid that everyone I knew would disown me. Right. And that didn't happen. So that was like a little tiptoe out of the closet. And it's kind of radical at the time. I was holding hands with my girlfriend in high school down the hallways in a small town in Georgia. Thankfully, there really was no consequence to that. And my girlfriend and I had kept a little journal that we wrote back and forth in, so we wouldn't get caught passing notes. We passed a whole notebook. And then that doesn't seem unusual.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, one of my parents found it, got really curious. I think one of my parents noticed that something was different with me, and they couldn't put their finger on it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if I was a parent, I would probably do the same thing. Got curious and read it, and naturally found out what was really going on in my life. And the next 2 years, from the age of 17 to 19, I continued to live with my family. Mm-hmm. And I was so lucky because some of my peers were kicked out of their homes and disowned around that time, when all of us were sort of coming to terms with who we were. It was just very tense. It was very uncomfortable, and they didn't know how to treat me after that. Like, am I allowed to have my friends stay the night at the house anymore? Ugh. Like, they didn't know what to do with that. Over the next few years, I started to come out to my coworkers and to my bosses and to strangers. And at the time, I had long, pretty blonde hair, and unless I told you, you might not know that I was a lesbian. And so people would make wrong assumptions and use incorrect pronouns to refer to my partners, or if I had a boyfriend or whatever. So coming out is not a one-time thing. It's an everyday thing. And the world does make a lot of wrong assumptions about us. So it's never really stopped being a thing that I do, but it's gotten more normalized in the more liberal places that I've lived. And maybe the worst that ever happened in those years was someone yelling something profane in my direction on the street. But I got lucky. There wasn't a lot of violence. There wasn't a lot that I could say was traumatic as a result. So I'm grateful for that.
That's great. That's obviously a blessing. And it's such an interesting perspective because, I guess it does make sense that you are coming out all the time, and that people assume that normal is hetero and just assume everyone is the same as they are. Or I hadn't thought much about that, but I'm grateful for the perspective of that. So you mentioned that you had long, pretty blonde hair, and you said that one of your bold moves was your haircut. So I would love to hear the story of that.
Sure. So we're skipping over a lot of years. We may actually backtrack to another story about the Portland to Los Angeles experience. But When I moved to LA, I moved here to start my life over. I was coming out of a pretty intense circumstantial depression, but it's also seasonal. Turns out I don't do well in gloomy, overcast climates. So if you're thinking of moving to Portland, be aware what your orientation is when it comes to seasons. I loved the city. I loved all of that experience, but it turns out it just made me really sad. Didn't like it. Didn't like it for that reason. I had made some career choices and some relationship choices, and just was numbing out with drugs and alcohol and just not in a very good place. So when I did finally decide to change my life and start over one more time into a new city, I was open to whatever life brought me at that point, and more tuned into my intuition than ever before. Mm-hmm. And with that, over a course of a couple of years, I would notice these bald, beautiful women that would cross my path. You know, you just see them sometimes. Yeah. And you make a few assumptions, like, oh, maybe she's in the military, or maybe she had cancer, or maybe she's a lesbian, or maybe she's a skinhead. I don't know. Like, what else do you think when you see a bald chick? You kind of want to know why. Yeah. Right? And all I knew was that they were striking. They were interesting, and they made me curious. And they also seemed so confident and so powerful in their own way. And I just always wanted to know about them, but I rarely had the courage to ask them, like, hey, so what made you decide to do that? And at one point, my partner and I had a new partner at this point, were Airbnb hosts, mm-hmm. and a bald chick came to stay with us. So I had this captive audience, and I was able to ask her questions about it, and she was so shy and quiet, and I was like, wow, if you can do that and be shy and quiet, then I guess that means I can do that. And she said she originally did it to raise money for like a cancer charity, but then she decided to keep it because she liked it. And I was like, oh, I've always been really curious about it. I've always maybe wanted to do it, because I remember the first couple times that I saw it, I just put that in the back like folder of my mind, saying like, I'll do that one day. Yeah. And one day it had started to get closer and closer and closer, and to the point that this woman was in my home telling me about her experience. I just said, okay, well, maybe now's the time. And my intuition was just getting louder and louder, and didn't even seem optional at this point. It felt like it was something I was meant to do. And I've learned how to trust that. Just trust that when I get this nudge, that there's a reason for it, and I don't have to have a logical answer. Yeah. Because the logical answer is, don't cut off all your hair. You run a business. You have all this beautiful photography. People know you for this particular persona you've created. Why would you switch that up? And why would you risk being seen as weirder than you already are? Because I'm already kind of weird. So, to that. But I just trusted it. So one day I set up my iPhone on a shelf in my bathroom and shaved it with the clippers under my sink, and just did it and recorded the experience so I could see it. And that video is now on YouTube because someone encouraged me to share it, and it's got like 30,000 views. It's fascinating how many people wanted to watch that, right? Yeah. And it changed my life. It completely changed my life. The way people see me, the way people interact with me, the types of compliments I get. How many people tell me that I have a good head? No one ever said that before. Right.
I want to hear more about how it changed your life aside from the different compliments.
Yeah. When you go through the world with long, pretty blonde hair and you fit into this perfect white girl persona, people make assumptions about who you are and what you're about. And I feel like it takes, and maybe anyone watching or listening to this might relate to this, it takes some serious ovaries to chop all your hair off. Like, it took confidence to own it. Because when I was doing it, I said, I could always just put on a wig if I don't like it. Yeah. And I haven't done that once, except on an occasion where there's a costume involved, right? But right. You can't hide behind your hair anymore. You can't just let it fall over your face when you don't feel like being seen. It's no longer an accessory. It's almost like cutting off a whole limb. Like, it's a whole part of you that's gone. So I originally felt very exposed, very vulnerable, very cold. You don't realize how much heat your hair holds in. It just requires owning it. So it changed the way I walk in the world. It changed how much extra jewelry I wear and how much extra makeup I wear every day in order to kind of balance out the femininity of my look.
Mm-hmm.
It changed the colors and the patterns that I wear, because it just didn't, I used to wear a lot of like soft floral pastel kind of things, and that just doesn't make sense with this haircut anymore, and like flowy materials.
Yeah.
So it changed my style. It changed the way I walk and show up in the world. It changed my confidence. It changed probably some things I can't even put into words. It's really hard to explain. But for anyone watching or listening, if you're feeling inspired to do it, it's just hair, I say go for it.
Yeah. One of my friends who is a guest on the show also shaved her head like a month or two after our interview, and it was on Instagram, and she looked amazing too. So yeah, I love it.
Bald is beautiful, or it can be.
It is. And I've been actually dying to do makeup on a bald woman, because I always admired it myself too. And like, I've seen G.I. Jane, and Demi Moore rocked it and looked amazing too. And I just think it is stunning. So I think you made the right choice, and I can't imagine you with hair. I thought my mom actually had breast cancer, and I thought she looked better with no hair. Like, I thought she should keep it really short, like buzzed down, but she hasn't. It's shorter now, but I'm like, it distracts from your like pretty face.
Yeah, you really notice someone's eyes and someone's bone structure when the hair is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are correct, in the people who are complimenting you are correct that you do have a nice shaped head. Not everyone does.
Everybody's like, my head's so lumpy, I could never do that.
I love it. So you mentioned that a whole nother potential set of stories would be how you became a life coach. So I am curious how that transition was and what you were doing before you stepped into your current career.
Sure. So I came from a working class family where going to college was a good idea, but no one really had a lot of experience with that. So it wasn't a part of our family culture.
Mm-hmm.
My parents just said you should, but they didn't do it themselves.
Right.
And I don't feel like they had the knowledge to guide me and help me get into a school that would make sense for my skill set. So I just kind of went to night classes and went straight to working full time right out of high school.
Okay.
And like, it's fine, but sometimes I really wish I'd had the university experience and had the option to get involved in some of the things that kids on a campus get to experience.
Sure.
So I pursued business administration, which is probably one of the most boring majors ever for anyone listening or watching who's been there. It's pretty boring. And I didn't feel very inspired by school. And it turns out I'm a very hands-on learner anyway. I need to kind of get in there and do it rather than reading about it or listening to someone talk about it. So I actually dropped out in my third year of college. I had started to shift my focus more toward marketing, and I found that I liked the psychology of marketing, and that was interesting to me. But I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so few people do when they're going to college for the first time. So I knew that wasn't unique, and I knew that I would figure it out. And I set about maybe around the age of 20, I made a 10-year plan for my life. And I just decided to map it out. And it's funny because that's a life coaching skill. So I decided to map my life out for 10 years, and I set a goal for each month of my life for 10 years. So if you're doing the math, that's about 120 goals. And it's so funny because I thought that's exactly what would happen. Like, I really thought that was how it was going to go down. And the optimism of your youth, nothing goes as planned, of course. And some of the things that happen in your life, you can't even imagine. Like they wouldn't even come to your imagination to write down in the first place, and they're better than you could have imagined. And I'm so grateful for that because everything's unfolded in such a cool way. Sales and marketing ended up being one of my strong suits. Advertising, event planning, kind of anything having to do with helping a business develop its sales force or its ability to attract clients. And all of the things that I was learning in those decades were skills that I would eventually use to run my own business. And it was only a couple of years in that I started to think to myself, I should run my own business. Like, I think I'd be good at that. And I can't stand reporting to a boss. I hate having to ask for time off. I hate that sometimes I feel more qualified to do what I do than my boss is. Just all these layers of rebellion. So any entrepreneurs out there, you know what I'm talking about, that rebellion?
Absolutely.
What about you, Andy?
Same. And
You know?
like, it's so funny. Like, I'm such a brat about being told what to do. If it was like even something that I was going to do anyway, I don't want anyone to tell me to do it.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yes.
no, don't tell me what to do. My
This
husband
is-
always will be like, I'm not telling you what to do, but can you help me with this or something? Like, he has to kind of tiptoe around it because he knows that that's something that doesn't
It had to be your idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that. So for the rebels out there that know you're meant to start your first business, but you're not really sure where you're going, that was me 100%. For about 5 years, I was really kind of flailing around trying to figure it out. And ultimately, I decided, this is an interesting thing. It was around the 2008 economic recession that, and I wasn't smart enough to really know what was going on. I didn't get what a big deal that was. Just coincidentally, I had decided that year that I was going to leave my last cubicle job and go work as an exotic dancer.
Okay.
Because in my mind, that was a smart way to make lots of money in a short period of time and free up my spare time to be able to start a business. Because it's exhausting to be in a cubicle job, working 9 to 5, doing something that drains you, while also trying to spend time on your weekends building something.
Right.
So it's not for everyone, not a decision I'm necessarily promoting. It was the right decision for me, and I had a really good time at it. I made great money. I learned a lot about myself. And in those years, I think that was where I had to walk out my own stuff. I had to go through my own dark night of the soul, and I had to really face my demons. And those were the years that I worked with a therapist, and I hired my own life coach, and I went to tons of seminars and workshops and retreats and just read all the books and dug in to really get who I was, separate from who my family wanted me to be.
Sure.
And I feel like this stepping into the bad girl persona, going to be an exotic dancer, was very symbolic of letting go of people's expectations of me and just becoming who I wanted to be at that time. So that was the big part of getting to where I want to be. It just seems so counterintuitive, but that was what taught me who I was.
Yeah.
And when I was finally ready to own it, coaching was something that had been calling my name for years, but I just didn't feel like anyone would take me seriously, like I had the credentials for it. So I had to build up the education and the backgrounds to finally get there. And ultimately, the sales and marketing skills and some freelance graphic design skills that I'd picked up along the way, and a lot of things that I had started to develop, all came full circle when I did decide to launch my coaching business. I left a lot out. That's some of the highlights of that journey. And now I work with people who, like me, know that they want to be entrepreneurs of some variety, but they're not really sure how to get there or what that looks like. And, they just know there's a lot of personal internal work that has to happen to get there.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love hearing people's different journeys and like the path that winds and weaves. And it's just always so fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, in all of like the seminars and on your journey, if you know what your purpose is, and if not, there's no pressure. I always feel bad asking that question, but it's so fascinating to me. So, or if it's something that changes, but yeah.
I'm so glad you asked. I've been working on this question for a long time, and I think I found it.
Okay.
I found this incredible Venn diagram, and it's just 4 circles that overlap. And those 4 circles are what you're good at, what you love doing, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs.
Okay.
And if you draw that out on a piece of paper and you actually fill in each circle and like get detailed with it, the point in the middle where all 4 of those circles intersect is your purpose.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
It was life-changing for me to go through that process. And I realized that I'm most passionate about empowering women from a feminist or an intersectional feminist perspective. I believe that the world will change when women continue to rise up and take on positions of leadership and influence and power. And my choice for how to do that is through private coaching. But also the bigger picture on coaching is that I want to create more role models in the world. Because when you can see someone doing it, you believe that you can do it. And if you don't have that role model, you're less likely to go for it. So a great example would be, I might have had a different college experience, if I had seen someone doing what I knew I could do. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that role model. So I want to look back at the end of my life. My purpose is to create more strong, empowered, badass women role models.
I love that. And what you said about seeing other people do it is pretty much the whole point of my podcast, is that I hope that people hear other people's stories and see a little bit of themselves in the different people that I get to interview, and then feel empowered to hopefully go after something, maybe a little bit at a time, but eventually, you know, make the bold moves of their own so that everyone's like doing what they want instead of hating their job or where they live. And I loved how you said, like, you realized that where you were wasn't by choice, it was circumstantial before you moved. And I think that's something that so many people never think about, and just stay wherever they were born forever, and even if they hate it. So it's so interesting to me. So I'm so glad that you shared that. I'm curious, another question for you would be, what the scariest thing you've ever done or been through has been.
Oh man, so many. How to pick one? Hold on a second. Let me think on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Take your time.
I mean, it depends on when you ask me. So I guess if just going with today in this very moment, one of my prouder accomplishments is walking across 30 feet of hot coals.
Oh, wow. Was that a Tony Robbins?
No. So this is 3 times as long as Tony Robbins' fire walk. For some reason, I feel like I need to tell you that.
Yes, I would too. You should brag about it.
I guess his is like 10 feet. So
Okay.
This was at a Peak Potentials event. I think the company has restructured. It might be called New Peaks now, but at the time it was part of something called Warrior Training Camp.
Okay.
And it was like a 5-day experience in the wilderness in Squamish, BC, up in Canada.
Okay.
And none of us knew that's what we were signing up for. Like, there was the secrecy around what would happen at Warrior Camp.
Okay.
So it was 5 days of ropes courses and intense team experiences, and really difficult comfort zone challenges, and just stuff that's designed to push you and make you grow.
Yeah.
And the pinnacle of that experience is the fire walk. So they coach you through the mind over matter process of believing that you can do it, that it's possible, and like getting into this powerful state before you actually walk across the coals. It's terrifying. I can't lie and say that my heart wasn't beating and that I wasn't just completely pumped up with adrenaline, but that's probably the point. I think the adrenaline is what makes it possible. Magical experience that I will forever have burned in my brain, of just being outside at night in this beautiful wilderness, and the grass is wet and dewy, and there's this 30-foot strip of hot coals right there in front of me, and I just have to take the first step and just walk it out. And I got one teeny tiny little bitty blister, but that's amazing considering what I did.
Yeah.
And it just showed me that if I can do that, I can do anything.
How does that even work? I've wondered this forever. Like, what do they explain to you? I'm sure it's obviously a process that we're not going to cover in, this little chat. But, like, I'd love more information on that, because I've heard of people doing it, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I believe that there is some scientific evidence that there's like an outer part of the coal that has cooled off. So the inside is red and hot, but the outer has this gray dust on it.
Okay.
As it's starting to cool. So the inside is hot, but the outside has this gray dust. So I think that gray dust does kind of help to buffer the temperature.
Uh-huh.
And I think there's this unseen element of the fact that we really do have control of our physical environment, that some of the concepts of the Matrix might be real.
Okay.
You remember, maybe some of you listening or watching remember that in the Matrix there was this child that could bend a spoon with its brain?
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but I think that's a real thing. And I don't know, but all I need to know is that if I set my mind to experience something, that I can do it. And I think that's what they wanted all of us to get out of the experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can't even imagine. So when, like, what I usually follow up the scariest thing question with is, what you use to push past fear. So I guess in this circumstance, you probably had some very specific training, and I'd love for you to share still kind of how you still made yourself do it, because I can't even imagine staring at 30 feet of hot coals and walking on it. But then also, especially as a life coach, I'm sure you give your clients advice on how to push through scary things. So I would love to hear what you have to say on how to push past fear.
Yeah. So I've made a practice out of doing things that scare me, which was why when you asked that question, I was like, well, which one? Moving across the country and leaving everything I know behind is a great scary example. Yeah. Shaving off all of my hair, walking across hot coals, holding tarantulas. I've done that a few times. Cage diving with great white sharks. These are all real things that I've experienced.
Yeah.
Skydiving, having an ayahuasca ceremony in the Amazon jungle, just really cool stuff that I've been so fortunate to get to experience. And what I've learned through all of this is that the fear is a temporary biological response. Mm-hmm. It feels so real, but it's temporary. And it's almost like an invisible force field. If you just walk through it, it's like there is nothing stopping you. You just have to walk through it. So I've realized that just because I'm having a physical, emotional response to something doesn't mean I'm actually going to die. But that's what your physicality wants you to believe. It's a fight or flight. And for the most part, we're not being chased by T-Rex or lions and tigers and bears, and your body is just trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And for the most part, the scary stuff you're tackling, whether that's starting your first business or proposing to someone you love or becoming a parent, there's so many scary things that we do in our lives, these major transitions. There's this moment of fear. There's like a wall of fear, but it's as porous as a force field, right? You can just walk right through it. I'm thinking of that scene from, this is going to date me. So the Never-Ending Story from the 80s was this hero's journey, and this boy Atreyu came up to this mirror where he had to face himself, and he was able to walk right through it. I feel like that's what fear is.
I love that analogy. And now I want to watch Never-Ending Story and get my Falcor fix. It is a great movie. I haven't seen it in forever. Well, that's a great movie recommendation. And do you have any book recommendations to share?
I do. Gosh, where to start? So kind of staying in the realm of what we've been talking about, The Alchemist is a really great book if you want to kind of get into the mindset of following what your heart's calling you to do, no matter how scary it is, and just allowing that journey to unfold. Have you read it?
I have, yeah. I love it too.
Such a good one. I think it's one that I'll come back to every 5 years or so just to be reminded of that journey. It's really, really great book.
Absolutely.
And then another one, sort of also along the same lines, but this is all about mastering your mental chatter and your inner critic and the part of your brain that shuts you down and tries to hold you back and stop you from doing what you really want to do. Mm-hmm. It's like there's the head and the heart, and they're always giving you mixed messages. Mm-hmm. So this book is called The Untethered Soul, and the author is Michael Singer.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
So good. I'll just give you a little tidbit. Okay. He says, imagine that your inner critic, the person inside of you that's always giving you all this negative feedback, imagine that you could personify that voice as a person outside of you, and you could sit next to the critic. Instead of it being inside of you, you're sitting next to it. It's at your house. You guys are sitting on the couch, and you're trying to watch a movie. How long would you last before you could get out of your house?
Right. Yeah.
They would have so many things to say. They would always be commenting on something. And noticing that's going on, because most of us, it's such an unconscious process. We don't even realize it's happening. Mm-hmm. So learning how to notice the critic and then how to kind of pat it on the head and be like, thanks for sharing. I'm going to go this way now. Like, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Hearing the criticism and continuing to follow what your heart's calling you to do.
I love that. That's such a great analogy. I think I've heard it a different way where it's like if your friend was saying that to you, and it's pretty similar, like you wouldn't put up with that from a friend or know to be friends with you if you said that to your friend. But I liked the idea of like having that person over for a movie, because it's easy to, I mean, even just somebody talking during the movie a lot is bad enough, but then if they're criticizing you, it's even worse. So
right. Right.
That's a cool one. I'm going to have to check out that book. Any other books you want to recommend?
One of the most life-changing ones during the deeper, darker part of my depressive period was You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Mm-hmm.
She's like my grandma in my head. She's the grandma I wish I could have had. Aww. She's been with us over 80 years. She passed away last year, I believe, mm-hmm. and just such a wise, amazing sage of a woman. I admire her so much because she took a major part in taking care of the gay men who were dying of AIDS in the 80s. Okay. Where everyone was afraid of them, and it was like this, it felt like a plague. She was there giving them love and healing during that time. And her books are all about self-love, all about the conversations we have with ourselves, all about forgiveness of the things that we've been through and compassion. And one of the things she's most known for is mirror work, where you stand in front of a mirror and you look yourself in the eyes and you talk to yourself the way that you would talk to your 3-year-old self. Like you would love yourself the way that you're just saying, hi, I love you. You're worthy. You're beautiful. You're important. What you're doing matters. We don't talk to ourselves that way. So to learn that is radical.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I think we all need to get better at, for sure. Mm-hmm. I think it would probably change the world.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, we would all be different people if we learned to talk to ourselves that way. Because everything that happens, every time someone comes at you with some kind of criticism, every time you encounter a hater, it's never about you. It's about what's going on in their world, in their head. And they're probably a miserable person. It's not about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so hard to remember that sometimes when you're encountering those people. But I think once you kind of figure that out and are able to practice the skill of realizing that, okay, that's them, they probably had a bad day, or they're not happy with themselves or something, and then it's easier to take the negativity from yourself when you remember that.
Yeah. One last book recommendation, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Fabulous. That one has been suggested before as well, but I haven't read it, but I've heard great things.
Also really great. Really great. And it touches a little bit on that, recognizing that nothing is personal.
I love it. I will have to check that out. Thank you for the recommendations. So, of course, with a life coach, I like to take advantage of the expertise that is available whenever I get to interview someone. So you've given book recommendations, inadvertently a movie recommendation, and I think there's a lot of value that can be taken just from your story and the things that you're naturally saying in conversation. But if there's any advice, any lessons you've learned recently that you want to share, or anything that you just kind of want to impart upon our listeners or viewers, I would love to hear what you have to say.
This journey that we're on, this life stuff that we're experiencing, I've found that it helps me so much to think about, as I'm moving forward in my life, to think about how I want to be remembered at the end of my life, and to make my decisions based on that. So if I want to be remembered as someone who was a positive force, someone who inspired others, someone who created more role models, as I'm faced with decisions that I have to make, I try to run it through that filter. Because sometimes it feels so overwhelming. There's so many possible directions that we could go. There's so much out there to experience, and we just have this one life. So if you think about what you want to experience in this one life and how you want to be remembered, how you want people to look back and think of you, it'll help you to sort through some of the confusion that you might be experiencing now. And ultimately, trust your smile, trust the butterflies in your stomach, trust those intuitive nudges and the whispers in your ear that get louder and louder and louder. And eventually you have to trust them. You have to listen, because the more you listen to what your intuition's telling you, to what your guides are saying, whatever your spiritual tradition is, the more you listen to that, the more you'll be on the path that makes you happy and brings you joy and brings joy to others. And the more you shut it down, and the more you listen to that inner critic, and the more you try to let your logic run your life, the more you'll get off your path, and the more miserable you'll experience life, and the harder it'll be for you. So just know that you always have that guide inside of you, and every single day you get to decide which voice to listen to.
I love that, and that's so inspiring. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anybody is listening and would love to become one of your clients or follow you on your journey or be inspired by you daily, where are you online that people can find you?
So I'm just going to have you remember my first and last name because it'll give you everything else you need. So Mira, Mira, Joleigh sounds like Angelina Jolie, but spelled a little bit differently, JOLEIGH.com will take you to a landing page. And from there, all of my social media handles are easy to find, links to coaching services, links to freebies. I'm very active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so it's super easy to follow and find me there. Even my Instagram, it's a private account for a reason, so if you're within my target market, you'll definitely be included and invited in to check out some of my inner world. I welcome you, and it'd be super cool to hear from you. So if you saw me or heard me on the podcast, send me a private message and let me know.
Very cool. I love that. I always save my favorite question for last, and it's always so interesting, especially if people have had an interesting journey, which is like every guest. But if 8-year-old Mira could look into a crystal ball and see where you are today and everything you've done along the way, and then you probably have a reasonable idea of what you'll be doing the next couple weeks or months, so the foreseeable future, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little you be to see grown up you?
I just think she would be shocked by what she sees. I don't think she could imagine that I would be who I am today. So let's go with 11 for excitement. Let's say that I would be the role model that she wishes she had, which is one of the coolest things to look back on. Thank you for that question.
That's awesome. And that seems like you're definitely following your purpose then, if you're able to have that response to that question. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. And it was so nice to learn more about you than I get from our Monday morning masterminds, which have been lovely. And thank you for having me as a part of that.
Yeah, thank you for being a part of my mastermind.
My pleasure. And I appreciate you sharing your story and the work that you're doing in the world. And yeah, cheers to more great role models.
Yay, I wish I had some champagne. Cheers.
Cheers. I hope you found that as fascinating as I did, and it definitely inspires me to read some of the books she mentioned, as well as to make sure I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone a little bit more often, because it seems like it's producing great results for her. And that's really the whole point of the podcast, is to encourage people to build their confidence, to step outside of their comfort zone and really go after their dreams. If you're interested in learning more about Mira, or if you would like to check out her social media pages or find the book recommendations she mentioned, head over to www.mandiem.com/episode 209, since this is the 209th episode. Also, please share this with anyone who you think would find it interesting, valuable, entertaining, inspiring, motivational, any of those things. I would love if we could get as many ears and eyeballs on this as possible, because as you know, my goal is to inspire and help as many people as possible to go after their dream lives and make things happen. So by doing that and sharing this, hopefully the right person will hear it at the right time and make a big, bold move and become a lot happier as a result. That is my goal. So please share. Also, while you're sharing, if you haven't already subscribed, please do. There is a wonderful challenge from Mira to look forward to on Friday that will definitely get you thinking, and I think could help solve some confusion in your life if you have it. So stay tuned for that. And while you're at it, if you could rate the podcast on iTunes, I would really appreciate it. That is a great way of telling Apple that we are worth listening to, so that hopefully they suggest us to other people who then check us out and help me again on that goal of inspiring and helping as many people as I possibly can. All right, that is all for now. Stay tuned until Friday, and as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.
Check it.